Hey, good people. Grits or cream of wheat? Who the hell is racist? Does anyone ever ask if they touch your hair?
Black Like Me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Black Like Me.
What I love about having a podcast is that I can bring attention to a subject matter that might otherwise go unnoticed. And so as I'm looking at the state of emergency in which Wisconsin finds itself, I'm looking at the various categories, and one of the key ones is education. So my guest, Kaleem Caire, is going to talk to us about how we got to this place of disparity. And I guess what I want to say is, with each of these episodes, I don't always feel the need to jump right to, well, how are you fixing this? What's the solution? Sometimes I think we need to just sit with the ugliness and the weightiness of disparity and process solutions later. So I don't want you to think we don't have solutions, because he's up to some great work, but we just want the gravity of the reality of this ugliness to set in. And listen, we are kicking off this series on Wisconsin's state of emergency. What I'm going to be doing over the next several weeks is sitting down with my African-American colleagues who have expertise locally, regionally, nationally, in certain areas, to just talk about how we've gotten where we've gotten in Wisconsin, with a state whose motto is forward. And I just want to say again, I love this state. I don't say what I'm saying to bash it, but if we don't have a clear call to wake up, we're going to keep sleepwalking. And so today, my guest is a gentleman I've known for his entire life. He's a president. He's a CEO. He's an educator extraordinaire. He's a community advocate. When I launched my Justified Anger initiative, he's one of the first. He is the first person I talked to after my wife that morning about how do we structure this? What do I do with this? And so we've been friends for years. Our families, our grandparents knew each other, and our children went to school together. So we've been connected for about 4 generations. He is an accomplished trailblazer. He's a social entrepreneur. He's a national leader in K-12 education and education reform. So he's the CEO of One City Learning Centers, and where the focus is really helping our babies, helping our kids just have the best start they can in achieving academic success. He and his team are working to really close this achievement gap that is so blatant in our community, and he's just showing that our kids can be successful academically. So he's someone I look up to. He cares about the community, a committed family man, beautiful family, beautiful, brilliant, strong children. And we're really lucky to have him back in this community. He started out in college out east in Hampton and finished up here in Madison. He's done some work in D.C., but we're glad that he's back here in Madison. So, Mr. Kaleem Caire, thank you so much for being on Black Like Me today.
Thank you for having me.
Man, so listen, you checked out the podcast. You're not new to this. You know that I do Black Icebreakers. Mm-hmm. So I got a couple of them for you. Grits or cream of wheat growing up?
Cream of wheat.
Cream of security. Cream of wheat, really? Oh my goodness!
I liked it with the brown sugar and
so you could dress it up. I got you. Like
salt,
okay, I got
butter.
you.
All right.
I got you. Now you have a big family, but did you have play cousins growing up?
I had play cousins.
So you grew up to find out, like, whoa, you mean they're not mine?
That's right.
Really?
Yeah.
Now I know you lived across the street from me, or your grandmother lived across the street from me. Did you have relatives who put plastic on furniture growing up?
Sure did.
Really?
On the couch and the
on
chair.
the couches.
And when certain people came over.
Yeah, that's right. I knew you went to church a lot with your grandmother. Your grandmother was a great vocalist and a trailblazer in our community on religious, faith, social innovations. But in the AME church, did people raise up like the index finger when it was time to leave church or to walk early? Do you remember doing that, or people doing that when they were like walking during a sermon or leaving out early?
No, I don't remember.
That might be more of a Baptist coaching thing.
Really leaving early.
I got you.
The AME church went until the pastor was done.
I got you. Let me see. When you were young, when you were disciplined, did you ever get syllable? Spanking, syllable whoopings.
I sure did all the time.
So like when they didn't,
that's right.
They would be explaining to me. I call them syllable whooping.
My grandmother was good at that.
Oh my
She made
goodness.
you go pick those green switches, and if it wasn't green enough,
See,
don't pick one that's going to break.
I'm telling you. Now, we turned out okay, but if people did that today, they might end up in social services.
That's right.
But they would make you go get me something to beat you.
Pick your own switch.
And they would give you a butt whip. I don't know why we call. I guess because that's what they spank. But as black people growing up, they're like, man, you're gonna get a butt whooping.
That's right.
Man, do you know what a face bowl is? Okay, so I guess older generation. So Kaleem's younger than I am, but like older folks, if you're staying over their house or something, you know, if they wanted you to wash up in the morning, they would kind of just have a, you know, this little bowl. They might have called something like those big porcelain ones with you know, with the edges.
With the
you know,
little towel on the side.
Right. Now, is this true in your family? Because again, this might be an age thing. Because I'm realizing that I've got to adjust some of the black icebreakers for age. But like, you know, we went to the same high school, but I was there years before you. Mm-hmm. It was an interesting phenomenon that when black folks from the South Side went to high school and we had to shower after practice or something, like our white colleagues would not use rags. Like they would like just use a bar of soap and just like, hey, pass it along. But black people like grew up with wash rags. Washcloths. Okay.
That's right.
So you grew up with washcloths too.
Yes.
That's right. You better not put that bar of soap on your naked body and then hand it to me.
I found that weird too when we were in sports. That's right.
It's like,
taking a shower. Like what?
You don't have a rag?
Yeah. How you clean it up with
that? Listen, did your mother, did your aunt, did your grandmother ever put Vicks vapor rub in your mouth in addition to putting it on your chest and on your throat?
Not in my mouth, but they would put it over my lip. You know, right under your nose.
Right.
Yeah.
So they make sure you get it. Oh man.
You're high on Vicks.
Man, I'm telling you. Let me see. I think I got one more. What's cocoa butter used for?
Oh man, we used it for everything, but definitely for putting it on your skin.
Yes. Man, I was telling people on one show, Kaleem, on your face, on scars
especially
and
during
stuff.
Winter,
exactly.
Yeah.
In winter, I went to the Walgreens in Fitchburg, looking for some cocoa butter because I got a scar on my leg. Not only did they not have it, I was trying to describe it to people. I said, well, is it a squeeze tube? I said, no, it's like a push-up.
That's right.
You know, you push it in, there's a yellow tube. They didn't know what I meant.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I'm going to drive to the Walgreens on Park Street. It was 3 for $2. Not only did they have it, it was on sale. And I said, they're only 2 miles away from each other.
How does like pop-ups?
Right, exactly, yeah. So how do these people not even know what cocoa butter is? I asked some of my white friends. They said, do you put it in your hair? Like they had no idea what cocoa butter. Do you put it in food? Like no, you put it on your black skin when it's. No, man, that's good, Kaleem. Thank you for letting me do this. I got one more icebreaker for you. This is more just trivia. Who's the most famous person you ever danced with?
It's Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, I remember you telling me that. That's why I asked you that.
Yeah.
Could she dance?
She could dance.
Did she smell good?
She smelled good. She was like, I'm gonna tell you, man. I know people say Oprah when she takes that makeup off, but man, she was beautiful, man. This is when she was slimmer too.
Sure.
And so I was quite admiring my opportunity to dance with her.
To dance with her. This man, listen,
she's got such a great, vibrant personality.
She sure does, man.
You know?
She sure does. I had to throw that in there because not a lot of people get a chance to slow dance or dance. Period. With Oprah. So thanks for throwing that in. You know, a lot of people won't brag about themselves, but when you think about some of the greatest educational innovations that have happened in our community, particularly those that were inaugurated or that debuted like in DC, Mr. Caire is really a part of that. And, he's hung out with some of the strongest and richest philanthropists, some of the most famous entertainers. You know, he's done some work with and for Quincy Jones. And he has just this plethora of information and knowledge that he takes with him everywhere he goes. But one of the things that he's really known for here, besides being an excellent family man and an excellent dad, is that he loves children. All children. His school is diverse. I was the chair of the board at one point. But when I thought about kicking off this state of emergency discussion, I figured that I had to start with education. And so one of the things I want to note that if you look at my podcast notes, I'm going to have a link to a letter that Mr. Caire crafted where he listed 107 links.
That's right.
To articles, media articles,
right.
Reports, of race relations and difficulties here in Madison. As you know, a race to equity report came out a few years ago claiming that the racial disparity between blacks and whites in Madison, economically, educationally, now even in terms of the ownership of real estate, is the greatest in the country. There's an ugly chasm. And when we say that, we're not saying that black people here are worse off than black people in other communities, but compared to their white counterparts, it's catastrophic. And so this man sat up to like 4 o'clock in the morning.
At your church?
At our church. That's right.
Right.
That's right. Just using it, the internet and stuff like that, and just putting this together. Number 52, integration plan shift urge. 60, Southsiders say schools need their help. I actually think that this is going to be like a classic piece. I don't think the media responded to this the way they should. But just in your own words, man, where did the wheels come off academically for black kids? Because we graduated when I was a kid. We read at grade level for the most part when I was a kid. I just wanted people just to hear things through the lens of your expertise. Where did the wheels come off, and how does this state of emergency impact our black babies specifically in schools today?
So first things to understand too, and to remember, is that our people went through 246 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow after that. If you don't count if you count the period of Reconstruction,
right?
We're looking at a very long time that black folks were legally disenfranchised in this country. And the one thing that slavery was very effective at was eliminating our ability to get an education. It was outlawed in 1830s, 1831. I think the Nat Turner Rebellion kicked off a lot of it, where he was an educated slave. And it was these educated slaves who were leading these insurrections or these revolts on plantations. So all these southern states that had slaves started to outlaw the education of slaves and make it a penalty up until death in some of those states.
People forget this. It was a penalty, a death penalty.
Yes.
A black person an enslaved person could be murdered.
That's right.
If they were caught reading.
That's right.
Learning. Okay.
That's right. And even some places, the slave master or whoever else, it was severe penalties. So when we came out of slavery, our number one objective was to get an education.
Right.
And, education was tied to voting and other things. And then America was strategic about now putting poll taxes and all these other things in place to making it difficult, the reading test for us to vote.
Grandfather clause.
We went through all these issues while at the same time our schools were by and large outside of a handful of black schools in the South that were designed to prepare young people for higher learning. You had very few schools in America designed to prepare our kids for college, things like that. Most of the schools were prepared for our kids just to learn basic reading, writing, arithmetic, and get a job. And so you come all the way up to the 60s, the Civil Rights Act. Even then, we weren't really focused on ensuring that young people were prepared for college, but that was across the board. So there was only in 1960, I think it was a 6 percentage point gap between blacks and whites getting college degrees. It wasn't a big thing.
Right.
But it was after World War II and then Vietnam and GI Bill and all of that where we saw, and then the scientific discovery and advancement in the 60s through the 70s, business advancement, that we saw far more people going to college campuses. So I've told people that, the challenges of education for black people in this country were wired in legally. And what we've not done is we've not done anything really significant to unwire that and to reform it, recast it so that black people are really ready to participate in this country economically. And so Jonathan Colzall wrote years ago in the 70s and 80s about these schools in rural and urban America. They called it Savage Inequalities was the name of his book. Another one was Death by Another Name, where he looked at these schools where black kids were going to, and it was like, these aren't schools. These are something else. These are dropout factories. These are places where kids aren't designed to do anything successful. And if they leave, who cares? And so what I tell people, when you're looking at the kids in our schools today, if you look into their eyes and you look really deeply, I said you could see all the way back to the plantation and a lot of their kids and come from a lot of their eyes and come forward. And if you ask those families, has anybody in your family ever really known prosperity?
Wow.
Those kids who are struggling academically, many of them, their families would say no. They might have a cousin, an uncle, ever. So it's like America has never righted its wrongs that it did to us. I tell people, what did America do after slavery or post-civil rights to really put black people on an equal playing field in this country? What did they do? Welfare wasn't it. So what did they do? Not much.
Wow.
Laws were passed, but what was happening? So fair housing laws, but could black folks get housing.
So man, so the whole plan to illegalize education was to prevent us from catching up, black people from catching up.
It was intentional.
And so people understanding where we are today, and I want you to keep walking through the history, because that brilliance is part of what I really respect about you. But I want people to understand, you don't catch up when you have generations of educational loss.
That's right.
It's like when you do that for 50, 60, 70, 100 years, just because our kids are going to school with other white kids doesn't mean that we've caught up. So those breaches in the gaps of educational opportunities were missed long ago.
And the trauma that came with it.
And the trauma, right.
You know, if somebody took you today for 3 or 4 days, and then they found you, there would be psychologists and therapists there to help you overcome the situation that you were in. There were no therapists standing at the plantation gates when we were released from slavery. There were no therapists.
Or integrated schools.
There were no, when we integrated schools, when we did any of these things, there was no one there. So we just have been going along to get along. So there's all these challenges that our families have been carrying with them. This legacy of stress, depression, anxiety has contributed to our early death rate. So when you're now talking about educating young people, America intentionally put us in this situation. In order to get out of that, you got to intentionally pull people out of it.
Right.
The problem is now it's all in an equity lens where white people were like, affirmative action. Wait a minute, that's not fair. Well, what? You live with an unfair system for 400 years. What are you talking about?
And the last 50 years of affirmative action has destroyed the country.
Correct. And so when you look at those things, it's like, you guys, we've got to do more. So when you look in the context of Madison's history, and you look all the way back, you know, Madison had this idea, even when I came back to Madison in 2010, when did these problems start? It seemed like they just started with all these people coming from Chicago. Well, you look at one of the articles in 1959, the mayor said Madison has a race bias problem in education, employment, and housing.
In 59.
In 1959. So it's like, for those of you, were you reading the paper? Because it was right there.
Right.
And it was constant. Black people were constantly pursuing inclusion, equality, in this community. And it was reported on paper after paper, year after year.
I mean, you documented it.
Yeah. And I wanted people to see that. There have been research studies done. There have been reports done over the last 100 years. So why do we keep moving forward while we're blind? Like we don't know. We act like we don't know that these issues existed. And it's a way for people to keep the status quo.
So
by not acknowledging that the problem exists, they keep the status quo, and then by always selecting black leaders who are new to town because they got an education.
Oh no, you're not gonna go there.
I'm gonna go there.
That's what they do.
So they come to town. They're brand new. Within a year, they're considered a leader. They're invited to every activity, every event. They're elevated, but they don't even know the community. But now they're making decisions, and people are supporting their decisions, which don't get to the heart of the problem that existed for 10 to 20 years.
And then you get folks like you, me, who are products of MMSD, Madison Metropolitan School District, and ignoring that.
They don't listen to us.
Right. We have some institutional history that we could use to speak into the situation.
They're like, please bring another black person from somewhere else.
A new black.
So we don't have to listen to these black people.
They click in their heels saying new black, new black. So what makes it so pronounced? The disparity between blacks and whites in Wisconsin, because you've lived in Virginia, you've worked in D.C. Not that what we're discussing isn't true in other places, but what has converged in Wisconsin to make the disparity of just such drastic proportions?
So on that list of 107 links I sent out there, one of the first links is a link to a report from 1934, where it was in the Journal of Sociology, and these sociologists basically said they studied the city, they studied the Negro in Madison, it was called, and they looked at black folks in Beloit and elsewhere too, and they said black people will do okay here if they do two things. They seek to assimilate and kind of go along to get along, and their numbers don't grow too big. Because if their numbers grow too big, they reference what was going on in Beloit. So I went back and read the newspapers around that time too, where black folks who were moving here in droves to work in those
factories in Beloit, up from Mississippi, right?
As there were beginning to be too many, black people were then moving out of the area of Beloit, further into Janesville, further out
Delavan and those kinds of
all those places, right? Because there were just too many, and then they started over policing the communities back then. So Madison, one of the answers to that is that Wisconsin has never really been receptive to large numbers of black folks living here. You get to Milwaukee, because Milwaukee had a booming factory environment,
Sure.
right? It was the industrial capital of the U.S. for a period of time. Then you had Detroit and all these others, and East shared that. But black people were recruited to come there to work in those factories, and other family members followed.
Right.
Well, when the industries changed and those factories started to leave, it exposed our poor education. We didn't have to have an education. In 1970, Milwaukee was considered by Ebony Magazine to be the best place to live for black people to live in America. And it held that.
Now it's the worst place.
You know, that's right. Now it's the worst place. But they said, when I looked at the census data, the average education of a black adult 25 years and older at that point was 10th grade. For white men, it was 12th grade. College wasn't really a part of it. But there were 76% of black men and of white men in the labor force, 74% of black men. We were each employed. We had jobs.
Right.
So you saw less crime. You saw less problems. You saw more stable families. You go through Milwaukee and the north side, you see all those little small houses, but abandoned houses. Black people could actually own those houses. And a lot of places in the country, they could only rent. And so once our numbers became too big, and then the economy changed and jobs that were available to us started to decline, now we're competing with traditional white families and folks for jobs. We always lose out. So first there was the increase of the numbers. When they see that, then Wisconsin starts to resist. They start to cut programs. I noticed that in Madison, too. They start to cut programs. They start to push people over into certain areas. They want to bulk rate all the resources in the south side of Madison.
Ghettoizing us.
And then second, they start restricting access to employment. And then that leads to domino effect of problems where now people can't work. And then, you know, most of these states have used prisons as rural welfare. Sure. As the rural economies have declined.
You call it rural welfare.
Rural welfare.
Because it's creating jobs and wealth in those communities.
Jobs. Yeah, and how do you ensure that these prisons have people in them? Well, you start new programs in poor communities where it allows the police more access to bring people in. You make laws that make certain crimes crime now, certain activities crime. Right. And you didn't have those before.
We didn't have before. Man, if you could pick any era in the last 150 years in which to be educated, if you could have done your K through 12, what era would that have been?
1950 to 1960.
Really?
Yeah.
And you didn't know I was going to ask that question, but you're very specific. Tell me why. Because schools were still black?
After World War II. Mm-hmm. You know, black folks were still struggling to access resources that came out of World War II. But there was a lot of money being spent. And out of the war, black men in particular, when their communities, they were heralded. Right. So it was a great time to be a black male in America at that point. Okay. The mass incarceration phenomenon, which in some ways always existed for us, it wasn't as intense. There were more job opportunities because the war industry created more job opportunities. So unfortunately, that displaced a lot of black women who were in those jobs while we were out fighting. Right. But we were able to access jobs more so than in any other time in our community. And there wasn't such a gap between us and whites educationally. It wasn't until the 60s where we started to see that gap really start to accelerate.
But when it was all black schools, we did not see those gaps. I remember
we were in the beginning stage, like the early stages of the civil rights movement. There was a lot of energy around our progress as a people. You know, that was...
And we had great teachers.
We had great teachers.
Who looked like us, went to Sunday school with us, lived in our neighborhoods. Yeah. I remember some African-American celebrity basically said that before integration, and a large number of my listeners are black like me are white people who listen into this podcast to be resourced to understand how to navigate their white spaces, to think differently about and critically about race relations. But this black celebrity said before integration, on a per capita basis, more of our black children went to Meharry, Tuskegee, these various historically black colleges and universities to become accountants, dentists, pharmacists, physicians, because we, being black people, built medical schools, built dental schools, built pharmacy schools. Right. But on a per capita basis, we were producing more of those professional positions in pre-integrated schools.
That's right.
Because integration didn't really fix our community. It really robbed our community of some of its brightest kids, but did not carry our black teachers with them into this integrated space. So it really caused a chasm in our community. Is that correct?
Yeah, it did. And the other thing that you saw that contributed to the drop off in the educational outcomes, the gap was closing between black and white students until probably the mid to late 70s. And then you started to see nationally, yeah. Then you started to see it start to kind of decline, go the other direction. Because, man, we didn't read. We were illiterate, right? And so the literacy rates closed dramatically over a period of time. But when you look at the marriage rates, this is something else I posted on my Facebook page.
Did.
And it was from the U.S. Census Bureau, and it looked at the percentage of people who had not been married by age 40, right? Mm-hmm. And what it showed was that up until 1970 to 80, the rate of marriage among black people exceeded that of anyone else in America.
Wow.
Any other group. So
yes.
But it looked at black, white, but any other group. And then when you got to the 80s, it was like a huge drop off between 80 to 89. It looked like a straight line going up. And I said, why did that happen? Well, when you look at first, it was Nixon's drug war.
Yes.
Right. Then it was Reagan. Those two things locked up millions of black men, took us right out of the neighborhood.
Out of their families.
Second was a decline of affirmative action and those opportunities that came on the back of the civil rights movement. At the same time, the economy was changing.
Right.
So the job structure was changing. At the same time that job structure was changing, it explodes that now we're going quickly from an industrial mechanical to a white collar technology environment. Well, our schools didn't prepare us for that.
Right.
So we were prepared for the new jobs. So you put all that together and you had this steep decline in black men being in their homes and being considered marriageable by women, and it was just a hot mess.
Was welfare part of that, incentivizing black women? I mean, I know that was more in the 60s, 70s.
But it had a smaller impact than all those other policies did.
Okay, but were we still seeing the residual effects of that inside?
Right.
But you said the other things.
If you want to know about that, watch this movie, Claudine. You can get it on Amazon.
Oh, James Earl Jones and Diane Carroll. Yes.
And it really got into
what
welfare did to black communities.
Right.
But that still didn't destroy the black family as much as the drug wars and the economic changes in the prison population expanding did.
Mm. Well, I'm going to have you just expound on some solutions of where we can go, but let's just be honest. Let's just play this out here in Wisconsin. What's going to happen in the next 25 years if we don't change, if the community does not respond to what's happening to black kids and kids in college?
I've told people, even in my own school,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on with behavior and all this stuff. America is declining from the bottom up. It's declining from the children to the adults,
That's
right?
sad, Kaleem.
Because we don't hold children as our priority, and we all say, "Oh, children are the future." Yeah, but they're going to be a crazy future if we don't invest in them.
A very dangerous future.
You think about the increase in poverty in America and the impact it's having now, not just in urban areas, but in rural areas in America. The stress that families are enduring. Talk to school people, and they'll tell you that they see it in their classrooms every single day. We're raising traumatized kids, and those traumatized kids are going to become traumatized adults. Second, what does nationalism mean in America today? When we've turned ourselves against each other, we're having a quiet, passive civil war. That's what we see playing out in Congress and elsewhere right now. Why would you be proud to be an American right now? What is America doing to benefit the rest of the world when all we hear about is the craziness that we're enduring in this country? And so I told people, like the women's soccer team, I'm all into like the national sports teams.
Sure.
They have something to play for. They're playing for women's rights. Men's teams, hockey, whatever, they can't get it together because what are they playing for other than together they want to win as a team? What is the nationalism that's driving our sense of connectedness in this country? So that is undermining us as well. And then the third thing is the economic changes in this country are creating such a caste system of people who don't have. Look at San Francisco. Mm-hmm. They have tent cities.
Right.
People who are poor, we're advancing all this technology. We're making more money ever than the history of the world. But yet we have increases in poverty. People can't even sustain their livelihood. Well, those people's children are in our schools.
Right.
They're going to become our leaders, whether we like it or not. So what we're building is an unsustainable future in America. So I don't think it'll be 25 years. I think it's going to be like 10. We'll see
10 years.
10 years. We'll see massive changes.
And
so
it's
already coming up the pipeline.
And we acting like this is not real.
That's right.
But it's happening. And so
America's a fabricated country.
Tell me more about that.
Well, we created a country. It's new. It's young. We still have an idealism that drives us rather than a realism. We still.
Compared to other superpowers. We're an infant. Like we're like crawling. Like what are we? Like 250, 275 years old as a formed nation compared to, Russia, Brits, Italy, India, China.
Correct. And the idealism that drives us is what's being, it's being questioned before our very eyes. We have racism, poverty, all these things that are catching up to us. Whereas before we could turn a blind eye to it.
Right.
Now we can't turn the blind eye to it anymore. And so when I say it's fabricated, we were talking about the vision of America, the white picket fence in the household. And, this was the land laid with gold that people in Africa thought they'd heard about in the United States. Well, now we realize that we're not as good as we thought we were.
Wow.
And so who are we? And that's where I've told.
That's daunting. That's
and
daunting.
Think about America in versions. America 1.0 was the Revolutionary War to the Civil War. America 2.0 was a civil war to probably civil rights, or some people say World War II. Then World 3.0 was between that civil rights period, World War II, up until technology boom in the 90s. Now we're in version 4.0. What does it look like? And so what I've told our kids, where we can inspire our children, is they have the opportunity to define what America 4.0 looks like. It's more diverse. It has to become more inclusive. It is global. We are not a global superpower like we think we are. There are others that can keep up with us. If you got a fiber optic line somewhere
and surpass us.
So what role will America's children play in fashioning what we look like going forward? That's what our schools and our communities should be talking about, but that's not what we're not.
Man, you're absolutely right. That America 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, is that your stuff?
That's my stuff.
You need to write that. We have a lot of listeners, so I need you to write that for you. Run with it.
I will.
But that's powerful stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You need that's a book. Let it start with some articles or posts or something like that. But man, that's just a suggestion I want to make to you. Mm-hmm. Your insights have always captivated my imagination, and I know you have a strong social media presence. Man, I just want to challenge you, just as one of your elders in the community, to maybe consider shifting some of that energy on some of those wasted one-on-one conversations and create a blog. Because Black people want to read about a father, Black educator, talk positively about our kids and what we can become. Because even when our kids are doing well, your kids are smart, my child is smart, we still have dealt with counselors still saying, well, maybe you should go to school here. Maybe you shouldn't go to Wisconsin.
That's a good point.
I think I'd encourage you to turn your energy from them eggheads. You need to get a blog. You need to get some national sponsors, get paid for doing this. You need to create this stream. You need to just talk and put all this brilliance down and just push it out there and let people just begin to read and think. It'll bring support for what you're working on with your schools, and it will cause the shift in thinking that I believe you're called to cause.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, stop wasting that time, man, in my opinion, and put that brilliance in your own blog. Own it. And man, just teach us, bring our minds back.
That's good. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, man, the way you just tied history together to help us to explain it, you basically said for X amount of generations, we've been either in slavery or Jim Crow. One way we've been in chains and limited. For how many generations? I think you said 19 generations? 18. And so we've only been out of that place for 2 generations.
Yep. And I use a 1619 to 1991, go all the way to 91 because it's the last great civil rights case. It was the case where it was ruled that the Supreme Court ruled that, okay, you can seek punitive damages against your employer if you can prove they discriminated against you based on your protected class status. But I tell people that 64 to 91 is considered the civil rights adjustment period. Like there was a period that people were adjusting over those 27 years to our freedom and our liberty. And we were fighting case after case to try to activate those rules. And we still are fighting today to maintain the gains that we have. Look what's happened to voting rights.
Man,
we
that's
went from
excellent.
reading tests to poll taxes to now IDs.
Come on now. Man, that's powerful. That's shoot. Listen, Mr. Caire, I want you to stop back by the studio because one, again, you always challenge me. You always encourage me. We're blessed to have you in this community, but because of technology, don't let Madison limit your brilliance.
I appreciate
So just what you say, what you do. Actually, you need to create your own podcast, to be quite honest. But I know that you're wicked with the pen and the keyboard, and you can do that. You don't have to necessarily have a studio. So there's things that you can do by just writing it. But we need that voice. And I think it's going to capture the right folks who will then ask new questions.
Okay.
So listen, you all, this is a powerful way of kicking off this Wisconsin state of emergency. You know, my guest, Mr. Caire, has just broken down where the wheels started coming off and how we've gotten here. And although, you know, you all do not necessarily live in Wisconsin, but look at some of the data, some of the stats of your own state and how it's treating Black kids, because often we will paint the picture as if our kids don't have the wherewithal. When I was a kid, we blamed it on the Chicago kids, the Milwaukee kids who could not handle the rigor of Madison's schoolwork. But what I noticed growing up is that the kids born outside Madison were finishing high school and going to college. Mm-hmm. The kids born right in Meriter Hospital, St. Mary's Hospital, were not going to college. The Black kids I'm talking about.
That's right.
So take a look at how your state is treating Black kids. Take a look at your kids' classrooms. How many Black kids are you seeing in AP classes or the tracks to go towards AP classes? What literature are you seeing about Black kids and Black families and their contributions? You ask questions. You don't need Black people to be there to ask, why aren't there more people of color here? You know, we're challenging the Black Like Me podcast listeners to not just listen and just suck up this information, but we need you to be change agents. So ask questions. If you don't see the kind of literature, the kind of diversity in your classrooms, your children are then being socialized to think that they're better than, smarter than people of color, Black kids, and then we're going to repeat this legacy. And you don't want that for your children. White people, you do not want that for your white children. So ask questions and don't wait for Black people to ask the hard questions. If you see something that doesn't work for your kid and you see that it's not working for Black kids, say something. Because that's why you're listening to this podcast. You don't want to just hear Black people talk. You want to understand our thought process so that you can make some differences in your own community. And so my special guest today has been Mr. Kaleem Caire, CEO of One City Learning Centers, a force to be reckoned with, not only here locally, but nationally. You know teachers, you're friends with teachers, you are teachers. Share this link with folks who are in the educational world and ask them what they think about it and to process it. And as always, we want you to subscribe. We want you to listen. We want you to learn. And we want you to be changed and help to bring that change to your spheres of influence. Thank you for being a part of the Black Like Me podcast family. Appreciate your listening. And thank you for being patient while we launched season 4. And I could not think of a better kickoff than to talk with my friend Kaleem Caire about what's happening in Wisconsin about education. You all take care. Thank you again, Mr. Caire.
Thank you.
Ooh, Black like me, yeah.
I want to thank Corey Saffold for creating the music for this podcast, my podcast manager, Tyler Nyland, engineer and editor, Eli Steenlich, my editor, Jeremy Holliday, and a special thank you to WORT Studios, where we record Black Like Me.
Ooh, Black like me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.